There it is. Why is it over a little?
Order. I'd like to call to order the Salem-Keizer Area Transportation Studies SKATS Policy Committee for Tuesday, July 26, 2022. Quorum is noted for the record, and I know Lori will get the participant list. The first item of business is the approval of the Policy Committee minutes from June 28, 2022. Were there any additions or corrections noted by any of the policy board members?
I have one, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I think it might be long on page 6 in my packet, but I had noted that I had been requesting a conversation about a citizen advisory committee formation for several months and had expressed my frustration that it had taken us this long because the staff concern and recommendation was that we would not have time to appropriately stand up such a committee. And so I think if that could be reflected in the record, I would appreciate it.
So I'm looking at page 6. Where would you like that put in?
I think it could go after that center paragraph. And then I also wonder, I'm not sure what the opinion is of others, but I think there's kind of some communication that's captured in our chat in this meeting that doesn't seem to make it into the minutes. And I don't know if we want to consider that for inclusion to make a more complete record for the public, but just a thought.
Yeah, there's a real issue around chat, and we're addressing this in a number of committees, actually turning it off because of conversations that are happening. And ending up with 2 meetings going on. So I'd welcome staff recommendation on how we should be handling chat as far as the public record is. It is public record, but how we're going to do that going forward.
That's a good question that I've not heard brought up before myself. My first thought is to ask Amber Mathieson, who has quite a lot of knowledge about public record, and see if she's been brought up among like city county clerks these meetings. So yeah. Regarding what else Sadie brought up on the third paragraph up,
right.
There's that sentence that she bring to Ms. Carney expressed frustration related to timing issues.
Oh, maybe I missed it. Can you help me find it?
Third paragraph from the bottom, the paragraph beginning with the word referencing, and the last sentence does address the addition you have mentioned.
Which page?
Page 6.
It is page 6. Okay, okay, sorry, I'm confused with
That's
the numbering of the PDF and okay.
Is that good?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other additions or corrections to discuss?
And here, although it doesn't say it in the minutes, there wasn't a motion regarding the CIC, but from the tenor of the conversation, we took it from the policy committee that we wouldn't go going forward at this time with the CIC. We can definitely bring the issue up again in the future. Of course, let's say a year from now when we want to restart the whole cycle of the plan. So I don't want to leave the impression we can never do a CAC. It's just the timing between now and when we have the drafts seems awfully short. But we need some more direction of precisely what the function of that CAC might be, composition, everything like that. So
Let me press pause so we can take care of the minutes, and then we can want to circle back with a notion. On the minutes themselves, any additions or corrections we need to make? Motion to approve as presented.
So approved.
Moved by Lyle.
Second, Steve.
Seconded by Steve. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, signify by saying no. No, hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. On the issue of the CAC, may I, there was no formal direction given by the policy committee to move forward with this at this time, but there was discussion about wrapping that into the public participation plan work as we look at mechanisms for engaging in public participation and whether or not this would be an effective means to do so, and if so, how. So I think that was where I heard the conversation leave off as a larger picture for public participation in general.
And we can certainly bring it up at any time, we can always go back into our our PPP does talk about a CAC as an option. So it's already in there.
Right.
The hardest step is actually figuring out if we're going to have one.
Right.
For what purpose are they there? Is it long-term, or is it an ad hoc committee that's just for the plan? There's a lot of issues, just like we brought up in the memo, to potentially go through. So always bring that up again, because we do this plan every 4 years. And it would make sense to get that discussion early in that process, so that we are clear what we want to do, rather than at the very tail end of the process.
Thank you. Sadie?
Thank you, Chair Clark. A question, do our bylaws allow for a subcommittee of policy committee members to coordinate with staff on development of a proposal for presentation to the policy committee?
Good question, and let's get that answer back.
Yeah.
And give our staff time to look that up, if we would.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah, you can get back to us with that later or in an email. All right, public comment. This time is provided for anyone who is not a policy board member to address the policy committee. We don't have any hearings today, so to speak. So is there anybody online or in the room that wanted to address the policy committee?
I thought I would mention that Donald George is here. He's a cycling enthusiast and frequent visitor to Keizer meetings. He says his bike is not working.
Gotcha.
So that's who that is. He is public.
Okay. Well, welcome.
You can put in the chat if you want to say something.
Right, you can let us know that way. And then Anna needs, I guess, like rejoining. I don't know about all y'all today, but I had to reboot my computer like 3 times to be able to stay online for work today. So I think there's some computer gremlins out there just doing their thing.
And Chair Clark, our visitor today is Katrina Miller, that's sitting behind you.
Oh.
I'm a university student, and we were talking to her earlier today about actually being an intern here at the COG. So I invited her to join us at the meeting to kind of see what we do here for SKATS.
Oh, well, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for including me.
Yeah. And definitely check back with any questions or ideas. Thank you. Let's go on then to item D, which is the SKATS fiscal year 21-24 tip amendments and adjustment. Karen.
So if I can share my screen. I was sharing it earlier.
Told you there's some internet gremlins out there just playing with us today.
Could be.
Every year.
So today I have 5 tip amendments and 1 tip adjustment. And if you want to know the difference between them, it's more the amount of things. So Anna is not here. Dan, hopefully you'll be able to answer. Oh, Anna's here? Okay, fine. So we have 5 tip adjustments, or tip amendments. The first tip amendment is for the I-5 Kubler Boulevard to Delaney Road widening project. This is a project that you saw about a year ago, where they added the Battle Creek Road Bridge and some additional widening on that. And this is to add $14.5 million to the project. 500,000 of it will be going to the preliminary engineering phase and 14 million to the construction phase. There is one little addition to the scope of the project, and that is to add broadband to the entire length of the project. And basically, it's to cover the cost of the Battle Creek Bridge, which was not fully funded last time. I do have, let's see if I can get this to, I have some pictures. So if you see that's the limits of the project from Kubler to Delaney. And that's what the Battle Creek Bridge now looks like. And you can see there's no room to widen the road underneath it. So that's the purpose of replacing the bridges so that they can widen I-5. This is the alignment that currently is the Battle Creek Road, how it comes there and how Wiltsey kind of tees into Battle Creek Road. The new alignment kind of shows it's going to,
You go back and point to.
yeah. I can back it up here. Not letting.
I usually.
There we go. That's what I was trying. It wasn't going. Okay, the new alignment will, and this is where ODOT, you can help me a little bit, will actually come across more straight across the freeway and tie into Wiltsey, and then Battle Creek will tee into that alignment. And that is a good way of not closing the bridge for the entire time. It will allow Battle Creek Road to stay open, Battle Creek Bridge Road there to stay open during construction. You can see how, and this, I'm not quite exactly sure how it lines up there, but you can see that the bridge will kind of, it'll be more of a straight across. Oh, that's way better. So, yeah. It appears that the new Battle Creek Bridge, it looks like Battle Creek Road will stop and Wiltsey is the major move there. So Anna, did you have any more comments you wanted to add on this project? Or Dan? Okay, I'll move on to the next ones if there's any other questions at the end. So again, we have 3 projects for fixing two amendments to correct the funding for transit projects. So when we guess we guess their allocations for the year. I do it at the beginning of the TIP. We guess what it will be for the next 4 years. We program it into the to the TIP, and then come about May of each year, we actually know what the allocation is. Then they have to go back and correct the amount to meet the actual allocation. If that amount happens to be different by 30%, it's considered a full amendment and you have to approve it. If it's less than 30%, it's considered a TIP adjustment. And you will see when I get the TIP modification tables, there's some in there too. So I know it's confusing, but these are just to basically adjust the funding, correcting our guess to what was allocated. Number 4, this is to kind of formalize what we had talked about at the last policy committee meeting, is to I don't really want to use the word cancel the right-of-way phase for the Delaney Road Battle Creek Bridge replacement. It's actually to delay it into the illustrative years of the new TIP, but because it's not, those years aren't in the current TIP, it's actually a cancel and then it'll show up later. So we are not going to cancel it. It just happens to be, the action is to cancel it in the current TIP. Number 5 is the River Road Manzanita McNary Estates planning study. And we had talked about that one before, is it's no longer a real priority, and to free up the funds to fund these short projects. Okay.
And we're good with that one. I talked to my public works director. We have another, we have to do the study and so forth. We're just going to be approaching it a little differently.
And I had talked to Bill Lawyer about that. He says it does not make sense to spend that amount of money we had set aside for this project to do it now.
Right.
And that try to get the developer to actually do the work. So that's what that particular resolution is. We will go and then number 6 is actually a tip adjustment. It's just something you need to do as an action for the policy committee. It did not have to go out for public review. So this is not on our website as a public for the public review part of it. It is part of the policy committee packet though. And that is to adjust the funding to match the actual allocation. When we did our UPWP, at that time we were told we didn't know the exact dollar amount for the PL funds and the 5303 funds that were coming down. And so we used last year's based on ODOT's advice, and then we now have the actual numbers, and they're off by just a little bit. I do believe that it was,
Table on page 2 that shows.
yeah. So in your little packet, so it was an additional $1,000 less in PL funds, but $38,000 more in federal 5303 funds. So this is just a minor amount, but it will adjust the UPWP funds to match the actual allocation.
Nobody will ever say no to getting more money.
So, are there any questions about any of these actions?
Questions? And we can take these individually or we can move them as a block. Dealer's choice. I don't see any questions. Okay, motion to approve resolutions 22, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
So moved. This is Steve.
Steve has moved the resolutions 12 through 17 as a block.
Okay.
Seconded by Lyle. Before we proceed, is there anybody objecting to moving these in block? We will pull it out. I have heard no objections. Any further discussion on these resolutions? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Did I get everybody? Okay, there we go.
I had the hardest time coming off mute. Sorry.
Yep. I knew I was missing a couple voices. Anybody opposed, signify by saying no. I'm hearing no objection. Motion passes unanimously. I will sign these and we will go on to item of the page E, authority to sign letters of support. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So over the many years, we get requests from our locals that are applying grants for a letter of support from the MPO. Sometimes there's enough time to come to the full MPO and explain what the request is and ask them to support it. Other times there's not. And when there's a small turnaround and they need it before the next policy committee, I will try to go to the chair, whoever the chair is at that time, or the vice chair, and get approval. I've gone to Kathy many times. She's seen copies of these letters that are prepared, and we get it to the agencies that need it. For example, I noted some recent ones in my memo. One was for the transit district for their South Salem Mobility as a Service. Another one was Salem's Path Project. So we developed those letters, but there have been times where we just couldn't. Let's say someone on the policy committee wasn't available, or the turnaround time was really quick. They needed it in 2 days. So in those instances, I wanted to get the authority of the committee that when we get a request for a letter of support, will the policy committee provide authority to myself as the MPO director or the COG executive director to provide these letters of support for translation-related grant applications when requested by a SKATS member, and there's not sufficient time to bring it to the policy committee. So that's the request that I have for the group, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions on this proposal? I think the part clarification is that this has no negative or fiscal impact on the other SKATS members. This is something that will bring dollars in for a project that we are aware of.
Yeah. Primarily, these are grant requests. Sometimes there might be something different, but most of the time they're grant requests.
Okay, and these are not ones where members are competing against each other.
Likely not. I mean, there could be some grants where Salem's apply for something and Marion County would apply.
And they will support both.
I think for Safe Route to School applications, for example, they apply for both. So they would be competing, but they're both looking for other support.
Just got something in my contact lens. Anybody else have questions? Okay. So we need a motion to, where's the motion here? There it is. Motion to approve giving the MPO director or the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Executive Director the authority to provide letters of support to transportation-related grant applications when requested by a SKATS member and there is insufficient time for approval of the support letter by the policy committee. Motion to do so.
I'll so move.
Moved by Sadie,
Second.
seconded by Maria. Okay,
Then just-
discussion.
Yeah, is there any sideboards that we can or do set on that? Maybe I missed it in the staff report, but do we have sort of like for the transit board, we have a list of kind of board goals that we seek to represent when we are presenting ourselves in the different committee meetings and settings that we individually represent, but as part of that group. Is there anything like that for this group that would help make a letter of support decision easy? And not just like an automatic yes, but some criteria?
Usually it'd be something like consistent with the long range plan. So it's a grant. If it's a grant request for a project that, it's a project that's consistent, not necessarily in the long range plan, but consistent. We don't always have every possible project in the plan.
And this would be something that if a member is proposing it, would be in their adopted transportation system plan for the member to be able to apply for that. So the member will have submitted the proposal consistent with their adopted transportation system plan. And we recognize each jurisdiction adopts their own plan. And that we honor all of those. So the transit strategic plan, Keizer's transportation system plan, et cetera, each stand on their own. So if Keizer brings a grant application, it will have been consistent with our TSP.
And the long range plan that you're referring to, Mike, is the MTP?
Correct.
Okay.
So, as an eligible project. So, we can apply for grants, but if our project doesn't comply with the constraints for the grant application, I don't believe that letter will be even coming to us because the applicant would have been told this doesn't meet the grant criteria.
And who tells them that?
Well, probably ODOT or Mike's team would say, no, this doesn't fit the criteria.
Often these grants require that project be included in some kind of planning document.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sadie, do you have Sarah, I looked at Sadie, I look at you. Sarah, you had a question.
Yes, point of clarification. So it says when there's insufficient time to bring these letters to the policy committee, is there a predetermined chain of command that you go through, or do we have some sort of anything to determine what insufficient time is? Or I just want to make sure this doesn't become just an automatic sign off on everyone.
No.
So is there anything that is standing?
We do.
That's not my intention.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're having a meeting today. If I got a request from Marion County later this week, and they said, oh, we need this letter of support, and I need it by Friday. I would definitely try to contact the chair and say, Marion County's requesting this, what they are asking for a letter of support. Do you find that sufficient or sufficient request? If I miss the chair, I'd go to the vice chair. If I can't really reach either of those and it's consistent with our plan, then I would sign it myself or have executive director sign.
Yes, I'm not questioning your intention. My concern is that this is in writing. And if we don't have anything else in writing to enumerate what you just said, if someday you are not here, that could change drastically. And I just want to circumvent that if we can.
So do we put something in there that if the attempts to reach the chair and vice chair are not successful in a timely manner? We might be able to put that in there because you've been very consistent in reaching out to me and say, okay, I need this letter. I'll read it over. You'll copy Lyle as the chair and vice chair, and we'll give the go, no go, or we might want to change this word or something like that. So do you want to add that into the motion? Okay, so that would be a friendly amendment to amend the motion to include insufficient time for approval of the support letter or being unsuccessful to reach the chair or vice chair. So the friendly amendment, Sadie, do you accept that?
I do, and I appreciate that that added detail. Thank you, Sarah.
Maria, you were the second, I believe. Do you accept that friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so that is now part of the motion. Any further discussion? Good catch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item F, the federal performance measures. Introduction. Right.
In your off lavender orchid is a short memo. So this is part 1 of 2. This month and next month, we'll talk about the federal transportation performance measures. Mike gave us a little bit of an overview back in May, providing a little background, but I just want to go back through this again. All started back in 2012 with moving ahead for progress in the 21st century. The Federal Surface Transportation Act that came along, and in it, Congress defined a set of national transportation goals and also directed Federal Highway and Federal Transit to define some performance measures that would allow the DOTs, the transit districts, and MPOs to track how well their investments are meeting the national goals. It also, as Mike pointed out back in May, and we discussed, is that there has been it's enabled. We can, where were we? Okay, so we're systems. We can get the performance-based planning requirements that we've talked about so much. That comes out of this as well. And so that's all part and parcel. And the performance-based planning requirements have been continued within FAST Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. So this month, and I got too much crap on my screen. Anyway, so this month I'll give you an overview of the performance measures. Next month, we're going to talk about the targets. So with each performance measure, there's a target that's being set, usually by transit district or ODOT. And then we as an MPO or you as the MPO need to either agree to it or come up with a different number. So next month, we'll be talking about the road-related ones. Sometime later in 2022, we'll talk about the transit-related ones. And sometime in 2023, there's a brand new one that we'll talk about. But we'll save that for later. So like I mentioned, the national goals defined were defined in map 21. The performance measures were brought to life by rulemaking by Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration through a series of rulemaking in 2012 and 2017. The targets for each performance measures are set by the DOTs, the MPOs, et cetera, and the transit agencies. There will be 1, 2, or 4-year targets depending on which performance measures, and we'll get into that detail. There's also a reporting requirement, and that's meant by Appendix P in the current long-range plan, and we'll be bringing to you a draft next month of this document as well. There are 7 national goals. The ones in bold have performance measures identified for them. And the performance measures, we can think of them and being three, well, I have it as 6 categories, but as you can see here, they're really got into 3 categories where they align with the national goals. So you have safety as one of the categories, infrastructure condition, and then system performance. Before we dive into the performance measures, this just gives you an example of what they look like. You're going to have your performance measure, for example, the percent of pavement on the interstate that is rated good. ODOT will have a baseline value for the reporting period. So we have reporting periods of 1 or 4 years. For pavement, it's a 4-year reporting period. So you have a baseline and it's at 57.7% because ODOT likes being very precise. And then they'll have a target for the future, for the reporting period, in this case to 2026. And their target is based on, in this case, they have a transportation asset management plan. And so they look at the pavement quality as is, their likely investment for the next 4 years, and their software can actually say, based on volumes, it's going to degrade. Here's a target you should shoot for.
If I could jump in a little bit here, this is a very common tool that's used for pavement evaluation for any infrastructure that has pavement. These tools are very well established for being able to accurately assess the condition of the pavement. We use it in my day job. I work for aviation, so we do a similar task where we do a pavement evaluation, and based on the condition and the trajectory for decline, then we can plan for projects. So similarly, ODOT being data driven uses a similar type of measurement metrics to help plan for the appropriate time to invest, rather than, well, this looks pretty bad, so maybe we should fix it, which is not necessarily a good way to pick and choose.
Trying to optimize your investments to maximize your infrastructure one.
Absolutely. It saves millions and millions of dollars by doing it this way, to make sure that you maintain a particular baseline of pavement condition, so you don't have to do the really expensive rebuilds, which we all just love, said no one ever.
And it's also wrapped into, I believe it was HB 2017, that had the cities and counties report this to ODOT on every 2-year cycle. Sidebar, you'll see some of that in the one of the chapters, which I think is chapter 5, at some point in the future. So a lot of foreshadowing here.
Thank you for letting me jump in.
No problem. That's perfect. So now we're going to dive into a little, each of the performance measures, give you what they are and how often they're being set. So we're going to start with road-related safety. There are 5 performance measures. They look at the number and the rate of serious injuries and fatalities. And this is for all roads within the reporting area. So if ODOT is, if we're talking about ODOT targets, it's for the entire state. If a specific MPO set of targets, it would just be for all the roads within the MPO. The targets are set yearly. It's a 5-year rolling average, and it's always for the next year. Previously, let's say for all these performance measures in the past, for this reporting period, the PC agreed to accept or endorse or support. Thank you. And it's getting there eventually. The target set there by ODOT or transit.
And it, just as an aside, we had a very robust conversation, but I don't believe any of you were on SKATS at that time about, can you back up one?
Yeah.
About what does that look like? Are these sufficient? And we really dove into, and we can do that again, because again, you guys weren't here for that conversation, and you need to feel comfortable that these get after the level of safety and the metrics, plus things that we think we can measure. Sometimes we find out that we can't, which is also part of that conversation. So just wanted to let you know, and I think we can make available to any of you, if you so request, we can get you the minutes from those meetings where we did discuss this, so you can get a flavor of how your predecessors on SKATS also address these very significant issues for road-related safety.
Right, and before I get to Sadie's question, also foreshadowing, as part of the conversation next month, when you get Appendix P, you will see what the targets were last time and what the result has been, and then what the targets are proposed for the next. So you'll get a little bit more, it goes into more detail of how you calculate these and where you can read, if you want to read about how they are calculated, you can find all that. So,
And also with that the anomalies that we are going to see with 2020 and 2021, because of the 5-year rolling averages, those will have a little bit of a hump, but those will somewhat even out as you look at those 5-year blocks. So we won't have, huge, if we look year over year, you're going to see some really significant changes because we had such big change in travel patterns, especially in 2020. So we don't want to make decisions based on 1 year that was really weird in every meaning of the word. And we want to average it out. So now, Sadie, go.
Thank you, Chair Clark. First, Mike, thanks for mentioning that Appendix P is coming. I tried to Google that one because it wasn't linked in the document and it just was impossible to pull up. I don't know why every which way I tried, I couldn't find out what was included in Appendix P in a meaningful way. And then just a question about road-related safety. I appreciate what is included here already. One thing that comes to mind when I think about the kind of investments that we are frequently considering is the availability of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and how having sidewalks available to people can increase, safe pedestrian passage along a roadway. And also, in areas where, I think of Lancaster as an example, where pedestrian safety is compromised by the number of curb cuts, which basically turns your sidewalk into a driveway and increases the number of points of interaction between pedestrians and motorists, which creates a safety risk. I wonder if we can include those in our road-related safety considerations. And then that kind of brings up maybe a larger question of, because
Press
these are,
pause.
I think,
Okay. Before you go to another question, let's answer that one first. And the answer is yes.
okay.
well,
And when you look at the curb cut issues, I know a lot of our TSPs already have that baked in to, as you do, and it's in our comprehensive plans. I know it is for Keizer, and I'm going to guess, Julie, it's in Salem's, that when you redevelop an area, you are going to look at the number of curb cuts in that redesign to minimize to the greatest extent possible and to improve line of sight to the greatest extent possible. So a lot of that is already baked in on the TSP level for and our comp plan of the comp plan level. So I will give you that, and I'll go to Ray, who's
Okay.
got a better.
I have more nuanced qualification. So what we're talking about today are the federal performance measures. These are immutable. These have been written by Federal Highway and Federal Transit. We can add to them, but they're not reported to them. So we can, that's part of like our regional indicators. We would have something over about more nuanced safety ones there. The other part is when we support ODOT's targets, in part, we are programming projects that are doing things like you're suggesting, such as building sidewalks or building bike lanes or making better lighting, or making the facility safer for all users. So by doing that, we are addressing these performance measures and hoping the targets be met or moving towards the targets. So we don't directly look at the number of curb cuts there are or the lack of sidewalks, other than to point out to our friends at Salem and Marion County and Polk County, et cetera, that, hey, we support your projects that you're going to do there because that will help us get towards a lower, get toward the ODOT target. And I also mentioned that the ODOT target is predicated on their Vision Zero goal for 2035. So when we talk about these targets next month, you might say, well, they're all, for safety, they're all going down, which is what we want, but in reality, they're all going up because that's what's happening. So things take a while, and as Jared Clark pointed out, 5-year averages help us even out, hopefully limited duration increases in the values. Does that?
Follow up, Sadie?
Yeah, thank you. And
Not cut
you
you off.
answered you answered my follow-up question, which was, you know, it sounds like the federal standards are a baseline that can be added to, and we can become more prescriptive, but not less so, which stands to reason. So I guess I'm not entirely clear though, is there a reason not to add other road-related safety considerations to our considerations, especially given that they are captured in the plans that sort of respond to at a local level, this longer range MPO level plan?
So yes, we can get more prescriptive, but what is already required in our comp plans is for doing design and roadway design to actually get at that level of planning. So when we as a city, and I can't speak for counties, but I know what kind of scrutiny we come under. We are scrutinized for how we do our street design, the curb cut, all of those detailed pieces are included in the comp plans. So that is where you would find them. And then each city or county, if you have to do the same thing, I'm getting ahead, not from Lyle, has to have those reviewed and approved by DLCD. So that's where our transportation system plan and our comp plans come together on the detail level. And then the result in increased safety shows up then in these numbers for reduced fatalities and injuries within our area. So each jurisdiction has to go through this more detailed level of planning.
And I'll just also say, you know, when we're looking at projects for inclusion in the plan, one of the criteria is safety. And off the top of my head, I cannot think of what it is right now, of course, but we are considering this, how well a project is addressing the safety of all users.
Correct.
We're not tracking any of the, you know, over time, we're not tracking data for supporting that, or that would be similar to something that you might be getting to, Sarah or Sadie.
Right, so I might just be maybe you might be losing me, but I'm hearing a lot. It seems to me that we're relying on cities and counties to do things in a certain way that will meet these targets for us without enumerating. All of that being said, serious injuries on roads, number of fatalities, all of these things are fantastic. We like them, we support them. I am with Sadie. I still don't understand why we shouldn't be including other things, like for instance, my road in and of itself. Very few people walk that road because it doesn't have sidewalks, it doesn't have those things. So of course, we're going to see low injuries and low fatalities because no one is using it for that. I, who have to take the bus, am the one that's at risk. So if there would only be maybe a singular or a plural, you know, injury or fatality on that road, it's not going to show up in these numbers. So I do think that we need to have more enumerated targets.
Well, I understand we have to remember the levels we're dealing with here. So when you're talking about the federal requirements and what we have to report, it's different from what we do on a regional and local planning level. So your road would be, you live in
South Salem.
So that would be in the Salem transportation system plan for projects to address that. And a lot of them are already queued up. It's a matter of construction.
Then what are the purpose of these targets other than the federal requirements at all? If we're
To
just
get us-
relying on everything else.
Because that way we can apply for grants. We have projects that meet these criteria. And then Salem can say, this project will target these issues. And this is how it will happen. And it makes it eligible for federal funding.
Right. So if we added something, it would potentially prohibit them from federal funding?
We don't want to get, well, I would be hesitant to add detail that might interfere with the way a city or a county has arranged projects in their TSP. Because locally, they've already vetted them. They've looked at, what we have done in Keizer. We have looked at all of our roads, sidewalks, lack thereof, et cetera. We have projects queued up and we're just going after them one after another to get them built.
So am I misunderstanding our point as a regulating body to assist in guiding them and making sure that their regulations are meeting our requirements and what we value? Like, because as far as when I look at this, like safety for who is my first question, because this seems like there's a
All
lot of
people.
safety prioritized for people that are in vehicles. There's very little prioritization if you're not.
So we're going to take a little step back. I understand where you're going. And, Safe Routes to School, a lot of the programs that we do holistically through the COG, I thought the COG, through SKATS, the shifted gears, do address a lot of these localized concerns. But what we want to do is make sure we're teed up to be able to qualify for the federal dollars that come in.
Sure.
And we want to make sure that our jurisdictions who have done their comp plans and their TSPs are queued up to be able to successfully apply for those grants. That's how we get the federal dollars to the Hawthorne, to Brown Road, to 45th. A lot of these projects that we've been able to actually build that did full urban upgrades. So that's baked in. And what we're talking about here is the metrics that we are providing to the federal government to make sure that we are demonstrating progress as a region, and how each jurisdiction is doing that really depends on what's in their transportation system plan, which has been approved by ODOT.
So why was so you mentioned at the very top that there was discussion about why these are what we have. What was the purpose of that discussion if it was pre-decided?
The purpose of it was to ask the very questions you and Sadie are asking, and then I'll come to you, Maria. I see your hand. Was how can we push the levers more for the things we value, which is the safety of all people and however they choose to travel. And we've, as we work through the process, these were sufficient on the federal level. And where we are applying the levers here is on our regional, our MTP and so forth, where we have actual control.
So Chair, I might be able to address a couple of these things. So I agree with you that these federal ones are the ones we know we have to do. And if you look at the list, there are both ones for vehicles, so number of serious injuries. Actually, that accounts for people in vehicles or people on bikes or people.
It's all.
It's all. But then there's a special category, the fifth one down, which is number of fatalities and serious injuries for non-motorized. So even at the federal level, they're recognizing that that's a subcategory that every state and every MPO should also take a look at. Beyond these federal required ones, we could look at things, and we do look at things. So we did our sidewalk inventory and looked at all the collectors and arterials in the UGB, and as part of that inventory, how much of that system is built out right now. And we actually even went backwards and said, how much was it built out in 2005? So we saw how much we added between 2005 and 2020. So to address the thing I think that was brought up by you and Sadie, are we protecting people on sidewalks and bikes by building it? Are we measuring it? So we are measuring that. Now, we haven't set any targets, but we are measuring progress. Now, if the policy committee wanted to set targets, that's up to them. There's no federal requirement to set targets. And of course, many of the projects are adding to that inventory, but we have not set those local targets, nor for other countless things we could. We could measure all the mid-block crossings built in the area, and we kind of measure them, but we don't have targets for them. We have other indicators of transit ridership. So there's lots of indicators of how the system is doing, but today's topic is more on these required federal measures that we know we have to submit. In the past, we've just supported ODOT's ones. There's going to be a couple that the MPO, and Ray will get to this, that our MPO has to submit a target.
So, I know Sadie wants to talk.
I'm going to come back to Maria. And then if that's okay, Sadie, I'm going to go to Maria and kind of go down the list. And then if we have some additional, we'll wrap it up and then go on to the next. Maria, thank you for your.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I just kind of wanted like a little bit of a point of clarification. So, so what I heard is that usually we just accept like ODOT's goals. And so the question here at hand is, do we want to just accept the goals or do we want to create something else?
Or is it, and I think the question, if I could put out there, is this the vehicle to do that? And I think that our vehicle is our MTP, which is regional,
Well,
but I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, that is the question. As sometime later, and after we look at all these, for each of these performance measures, will make the decision whether you want to support the target that is set by ODOT or transit district, or create our own target. You know, and that will be based on the data available and where we think things are going. So we can. Most MPOs in the country do not. Although I will say the one that if they're going to, safety is probably the first one that they do. And today's meeting is not to make that decision. This is going to be a two-part discussion. Today was more of an introduction about what are these federal performance measures? Just generally, what are they? So that when we talk about the actual targets next week and next month, it's not brand new. So we wanted to take you slowly through this. First about what the measures are, and then what the targets are, and should we support state targets or not? And then we have some individual, there's like 2 or 3 individual MPO targets we have to set. But today is just an introduction. No decisions making, really, just discussion, questions, and answers.
But I love this conversation because safety has been job one for every single one of us and all of our predecessors. And I expect that the people coming after us will continue to put that as job one. Steve, can I go to you?
Yeah, in listening to this, to me, it feels like, or it sounds like we currently cover our bases. We review things as the projects move forward. And so I have a hard time adding layers if we're meeting the requirements as they are right now. It's just my 2 cents worth. Because if we add layers, that's more work for more people, more time involved. And if we're satisfying the requirements, why put more dirt in the hole type of thing?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Lyle and then I'll circle back.
So thank you. I just want to know, for these projects in our list, all of these criteria has been vetted. So we are competing against money statewide. So these criteria here is consistent statewide at all the MPOs, all the communities, all of ODOT projects. And they're there for a reason, so they can address the most dangerous intersections and roadways first and get criteria and priorities set. Then once those are came, they get top priority. Now we get all of the local jobs. When we get the projects handed to us, all of this stuff's been looked at and measured through already. We have to make sure that it does meet, and we I gather staff gives it a second glance to make sure it meets all criteria. And then we move forward. So we're not at the level here. We're above that level. This is already here. We're trying to find and place when the projects get done and what priority on a local level, correct?
Pretty much, it's the federal government set these national goals and these performance measures to back them up. And they're asking states to report on it, not just like promise, oh, we'll do a good job on roads. They want data. And it's our job as an MPO to either say we support the state goals and we're a part of them, we're all part of the team, or we could set our own individual ones. So you're right, we're really at that high level of just kind of reporting back to the federal government. We're making good use of the money. We have targets we'd like to reach. Here's what you asked us to reply to you as far as targets. Then we get to that other stage of actually implementing projects and showing that, hey, these projects cover safety, they cover road condition, and we picked those projects because we set targets saying we would try to make progress on those targets. So you're right, Vice Chair, there's a very high level data kind of thing and national goals, and then there's a local, are we funding the right projects? So, and just 2 points of clarification. One is for all the performance measures at the state level, there are consequences if they don't meet their targets. So in bridge and pavement quality, if they don't get meet their target, they have to spend more money. In safety, if they don't meet their targets, they have to spend more money, and then there's some other issues as well. So, but for the MPO, there's no consequences one way or another. The second thing, and this goes towards Sadie's comment in the chat stream, if we're doing a safety target, we will be relying on ODOT data, as that is the only one that we have consistently. So whether it's incomplete or not, that's what we have to work on and then Karen and Mike are working on the safety plan at some point that will help work out possible other sources or just give us a better view of, or more complete view of what is currently going on. That is my clarifications for that.
And then I just want to note for the record, Sadie's comments and but to also concur with Ray that we have to use data sources that we have access to. So if there's another data source that we can add to our collection, that would be fabulous. But we can't force people to report.
Unfortunately.
No, we can't. There's just some limitations to what you can make people do. But on the other hand, locally, what we can do is, within our cities, we also, we know what's going on when we put together our transportation system plans and prioritize our projects within our TSPs. We address a lot of those issues. So I just want to clarify that real quick. There's been great conversation, but we are up against top of the hour, and I want to go ahead and move us through the rest of these particular issues. I know this is number one for all of us. And we will revisit it next time.
And the other ones are pretty boring.
It's a wrap up, I promise.
Real quick.
I just want to make a formal request, since it seems this isn't the right place for this, if we could get some direction for where it is, since it seems to matter to everyone so much, that would be great.
It's in absolutely everything, and we'll see it again in the MTP and in all of our TSPs.
Great.
We will take that note.
Yep.
Okay, where am I?
All right, where are you?
Safety. Let's see. Now we're talking about the now we're talking about infrastructure, pavement condition. These apply for interstate and the non-interstate national highway system. These are good and poor conditions. These are explained in more detail in Appendix P and specifically in Chapter 5. You can review the existing data to give, in case people aren't familiar with what the national highway system is. If you see on the map here, red and black. Red is, those are the interstates and the principal arterials. So the larger roads in the area. These are roads that the feds have defined as important at the national level consistently across the country.
And for anybody who's really surprised at that one kind of at the north end, that is the Parkway in red.
Blue is what, Ray? The blue are, we don't care. Minor arterials.
Gray.
Yeah, so. And for this purpose, let's focus on red and black. Okay. There is no blue, there is no gray.
That means it's our job, right?
Moving along. So bridge condition, this is talking about all the bridges on the NHS and either good or poor condition, the percentage of. And here they're only talking about the bridge area, the deck area, part that you drive on, not the substructure, not the superstructure. Bridge and pavement and all the other ones we're going to talk about. We set these every 4 years. Safety is set every year. ODOT sets it when they're doing their HSIP, their Highway Safety Improvement Program. We did for pavement, etc. Bridge, we set it every 4 years. There's a mid-year target and then a 4-year target. System performance, there's a slew of them. We have travel time reliability on the interstate and the non-interstate NHS. And for the people in the room, that says that are reliable. just in case you're wondering what those words might be that we can't see. And then we have freight movement, truck time reliability. Defense tell us what reliable means. They tell us how to measure this on there. They actually give us the data sources, and this all gets done automatically. It's wonderful. There's
Highly regulated.
yes, there's
Very highly
CMAC. Karen has talked about CMAC program, congestion mitigation and air quality before. Previously, we just had to deal with the total emissions reductions of carbon monoxide for all CMAC funded projects. We're getting 2 new performance measures starting this year. And these are different in that we have to develop SKATS specific targets in consultation with ODOT. It doesn't make sense to have a statewide number for annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita. It makes more sense when you're just looking at an MPO. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, these only apply to MPOs that are non-attainment or maintenance areas for an air quality issue. And since we are, and Eugene is, we both get to do this. As I mentioned, there are no penalties for missing the target. There is no reward for missing the target. We're just setting the target and then hopefully showing that we're, I don't know, what we're doing.
But if I could say though, that projects that are aimed at working toward these targets are then CMAC eligible. So there's the
Well-
reward. If you are doing projects that have a rational nexus to reducing carbon monoxide and particulates in the air, you then can use CMAC funds for that. And we fought really hard to get those dollars.
As long as Karen can document it, yes.
As long as I can document it.
I mean, you're sticking around.
So we'll have targets we'll have more discussion about this probably next month. As I alluded to, there's a new one. This just was published on July 15th in the Federal Register. Comments are open to October 13th. It's for tailpipe emissions of carbon dioxide on the NHS. Final rules will be published at a date to be determined. I would guess within a year of October 2013. They're proposing alignment for the reporting period, the same as everything else. There's not much else to say because proposed rules have this tendency of changing before their final rules. And so we will see what happens. So that's it for the roadside. There are 2 groups of performance measures on the transit side. First part starts off with state of good repair. 3 of these apply to chariots. The infrastructure one is rail related and is not applicable. These targets are set yearly and reported when they report their data to the National Transit Database. There's 3 performance measures for transit related safety. Clarification for people who don't do transit numbers all the time. Unlinked passenger trips are every time you get on a bus. These targets are also set yearly. And then we had this discussion a little bit before. For each of the targets, for each of the performance measures, we can, except for peak hour excessive delay and non-SOV, we can either okay. Thank you. Okay, so you have 2 options. We can agree to support the state or transit targets by planning doing plans and program projects that contribute to meeting the targets. And this is what we do when we provide funds to the transit district for buses. This helps them meet their targets for state of good repair. This is what happens when we do funds for projects that include sidewalks, et cetera. That's helping ODOT meet their targets for safety. Conversely, we could set a quantifiable target for a particular performance measure for the metropolitan planning area. And we would do this in consultation with either ODOT or transit district. And then for the peak hour excessive delay and non-SOV, we have to set a quantifiable target. We've talked with ODOT about potential ones. We'll talk with the tech in a couple of weeks about the numbers, and then you'll see them next month. And so that gets us the next steps. Next month, August 30th, we'll have the Appendix P with all these proposed targets at ODOT level and ours for the for all the performance measures we talked about. And then we can discuss whether we want to support these or produce a performance measure ourselves. Yes.
I'm really hoping that you meant August 23rd,
No, I have August 20.
because if it's the 30th, I am
Wait,
SOL.
let's see.
I saw the August 23rd as well.
It's, yeah,
I've got it on the 23rd.
fourth Thursday.
I just looked it up, looked at it.
August
Okay.
23rd.
Thank you, I'm breathing. I can't clone, it's illegal.
So, one day I'll learn how to read a calendar.
Well, you go to last, and this is one of those lovely 5 Tuesday months.
Yeah, okay, sorry. There we go. Questions?
Okay,
Maria.
Maria.
I'm gonna give y'all another acronym because I know like at one point Sarah taught us TLDR, too long didn't read. I need an ELI5, which is explain like I'm 5 on system performance, because it's really, it's definitely like, I don't know, like above my pay grade when it gets into the percent of person miles traveled. The calculation is done for each segment during each time period. If the maximum value for a segment given during a time period exceeds the threshold target of 1.5, the segment is classified as non-reliable. That kind of stuff. That's like really like technical. So I need like an explain like I'm 5 on that. And I know that we are like 11 minutes after the hour. So I don't know if maybe I could get some help in scheduling a time for someone to be able to.
I will, the appendix P provides a little bit more detail, and I can also write this hopefully at, if not the 5th grade level, at least underneath federal regulation level. But just in general, so each road, they chunk into segments, and then each segment has data with the volume, the speed, whatnot, and we know that, and so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about segments. And then you do a calculation based on, what are we doing here? Well, for a time period, for reliability, it's going to be the peak hours, so it's like 6 to 10 in the morning and 3 to 7 at night, or one of those.
Hey, Ray.
And I'll talk about this more next month. Yeah.
Actually, what I would like is anybody who would like a one-on-one tutorial to ask these questions, I would love for them to schedule time with Ray.
Yeah.
I know you're very busy, but I think that you can get your individual questions answered, especially relative to the sector you work in. And I think that that will help bridge this work with specific to the work that you do. And that might be able to answer some of the individual questions. So is everybody good with that, to schedule time with Ray between now and then? And Sadie was saying about the Appendix P.
So is it on our website? Is it right?
Yeah, I've looked as high and low. I've Googled it just to figure out what was in there because it seemed like such a relevant document to this presentation report.
Yeah, Ray, can we post the adopted one from the last plan kind of separately on the page?
It's probably buried.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll get that posted, visible. We'll send the link to everybody. And then we'll highlight Appendix P as in Papa. And that will give us also opportunity to ask some questions, technical questions. Also, those of us who have a member on the Technical Advisory Committee, I've got my Public Works Director. I would encourage each of us to interface with our TAC member to make sure that we really are connecting on what's going to be relevant with relative to our comp plans and our TSDs. And I see, yeah. So that I think would be helpful for each of us to be able to gear up and ask questions and be prepared to engage on the 23rd. Does that sound good to everybody? I'm getting head nods.
You can see why we divided this into several meetings, because it's
complicated.
complicated.
Yeah.
topic.
And, going back, in my Wayback Machine to when I was first starting this work, I totally understand your questions because I asked many of the same ones, and I've had the benefit now of working with some of these folks for long enough. And I think and what helped me was the one-on-ones with Mike and Mike's predecessor, Richard. So I would encourage you to take advantage of the tremendous brain trust we have here at the COG and in your own staff.
It was probably easier then because we were doing it piecemeal as the rules were being done.
That's
So
true.
you weren't getting everything all at once.
A little bit less of the deck gun and a little bit more of the 1-inch fire hose.
And I need to look Dana back into the room.
Oh, she's probably having the same problem I do with the state system today.
Okay.
I like that ELI 5. Thank you, Maria. That is now entered in my my list of things to remember. Explain like I'm 5. I like it. Okay,
Work on that later.
so we're
Item B.
okay. Let's go on to item G. We've got 23, 20, 50 MTP criteria.
You did find appendix P online, by the way.
You did find it. Okay.
No, it's in the same document. It's like page 363 of the PDF.
Oh, Lordy, no wonder. Sandy,
That-
you're right.
that's-
It was buried.
If I say Ray, we'll pull it
Yes.
out, make it a separate link.
So-
Right. Online should also have.
I found the
That doesn't-
document, but a control F did not turn anything up for appendix P. So maybe just
page
my Google
300.
search for the document turned up the wrong thing.
Yeah,
It would be great to have these linked in the staff reports.
We'll make it much easier to find. All right, let's go on then to G and talk about the MTP criteria.
Okay, so let's see, switching gears totally. Previously this year, we talked about the goals and objectives of the long range plan, and we also talked about the criteria back in April, not March of this year as well. And the criteria are used to evaluate projects, and they're based on the goals and objectives of the long range plan, and in part to show progress towards meeting the performance measure targets. We're using the criteria to evaluate all the proposed projects that go into the long range plan in relation to whether they meet one or more of the goals of the plan, because we want the projects to actually further our plan and be consistent with it and do something useful. And also, this is just one part of selecting projects. The plan is financially constrained, and so we need a way of considering all the projects. And so when we, as staff, evaluate the projects, we come up with a numerical ranking value. We look at it with the TAC. They provide a recommendation to the PC. The PC will then select projects, moving them around as necessary, because since the criteria are only one set of one set to consider as part of selecting projects, and there are other non-tangible, non-quantifiable items. That's what you guys are specializing in. This is a priority for our jurisdiction. We'd like to make sure it's included. That's where you come in. So and there are 10 existing criteria that we used, and yeah. Yes. So, and we're not suggesting any changes for these, get towards some of the performance measures we're talking about. These are helping move things along, addressing a known safety location, et cetera.
And also if I could, the gap in the regional system goes to our earlier conversation as well. Those two, that the known safety and the gap,
Yeah,
reference back to our earlier conversation.
gaps in sidewalks, gaps in bike
Right.
ways, gaps in signal interconnects regional system. There are a number of regional systems that we define, roads as well. And so what we're proposing briefly is first to revise the wording on the environmental justice criteria. Then we have a criteria for the environmental goal, remove the current one and replace it with one based on greenhouse gases. So in more detail, the environmental justice, and that we go into more detail in the memo. The current wording does not produce a disproportionate burden on an EJ population, and we're proposing to change it to projects likely to improve transportation facilities within the EJ area, recognizing that EJ populations are throughout the SKATS and the urban area. But there are areas where there's higher populations, higher proportion of EJ populations to the regional average. And the projects that are going into those areas that are helping safety, that are providing a more complete system, should be acknowledged. So we're switching to a focus on the benefits, and we're providing a point, as it were, for beneficial projects. This is also somewhat in line with the Justice 40 initiative.
And before we go on, I'd like to point out something that has traditionally been done in SKATS. This is actually putting into words what we have traditionally already done. When we look at large projects such as Silverton Road, 45th, Brown, Auburn, a lot of these large stretches where it was a multimodal upgrade, a lot of this entered into the conversation. This is around schools, it's around multi-family housing, this is around providing safe alternatives and multimodal access. So this is how SKATS, your predecessors, have prioritized projects historically. We weren't looking at, is this going to negatively impact, by putting, dividing a community as been done in the past, but those multimodal projects, the urban upgrade projects, were actually, the conversation around that was exactly this. How is it going to benefit safe routes to school? How is it going to benefit getting to jobs, to shopping, to other things that people in the community need, and they have a choice whether they're going to walk, drive, bike, take transit. So, and the projects you see right now in our project list coming up are very much like this. My Wheatland Road project is very similar. It is multimodal. It will take care of gaps. It will provide for people who don't necessarily drive or don't want to drive for any one of a number of reasons. Will have complete alternatives. So I just want to point out, for those of you who weren't part of the project selection in the past, this is what SKATS has been doing for a very long time, at least in my tenure. Sadie, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Chair Clark. Just a quick comment on this, and then maybe kind of a general observation on this agenda item, because I have a hard stop at 1:30, and I'm concerned I won't be able to participate in the whole conversation, which is such an important one. Reflecting on the EJ stuff, I feel like the improved transportation facilities, I'm going to propose some equally vague language, but improved transportation facilities, I think that could take different shapes that wouldn't necessarily benefit quality of life in an environmental justice area. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to add project is likely to improve transportation facilities and quality of life within an EJ area, so that we could look at some of those more qualitative aspects to transportation improvements rather than just, resurfacing or, something like that.
Well,
and then just quickly
Before
before
we go
I
on the
do
next
have,
one,
okay,
we're on the next one. Let's break this up. One is that we would have to have a metric to go with that, and so that would be more difficult to measure. I know what you're getting at is that resurfacing doesn't appear to improve quality of life, although if you're not damaging the front end of your car, that improves everybody's quality of life. And also the people in the bus barn really appreciate that, not having to fix the front end of our transit buses. But more to the point, we'd have to have metrics, and that may or may not be a possibility, but that would be something we could look at. But
I mean, it certainly
let's
could.
keep thinking on that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could benefit from more, as Sarah pointed out in the previous conversation about safety, more enumeration of what it is we mean. Because when I think of improving transportation facilities, I could think of adding a lane, which would make a pedestrian crossing more difficult because it's longer from curb to curb. I could think of lots of ways that I could improve transportation facilities within an EJ area that would actually be detrimental to the folks living within that space and using that transportation facility. To the damage of the front end of the car, a lot of these people may not have access to a vehicle. So how does that matter?
Well,
And so I
what
think
offline.
there's
I get where you're going with it. And this gets into the project development that's specific to the different areas. So
Mhm.
that's the case that each project is going to have to make for itself, that this is improving transportation facilities for an EJ area. And that is on the applicant, the project development, to demonstrate that within the context of that neighborhood and so forth. So I think that if we get too prescriptive on what this actually means, we remove the possibility of actually responding to something within a particular neighborhood or corridor.
Mhm.
So that's just a thought there.
Appreciate that. And then before I jump off,
okay.
I was a little surprised by the number of criteria that we sort of glossed over and didn't have conversation about, that we weren't proposing any changes for. I think that they might deserve a more robust conversation.
We had a conversation earlier this year. So this is like month 2 or 3.
Oh, I agree that we did, and I agree
And it was
that it is
nothing-
like a number of presentations ago. I just didn't believe that we had ever landed on something, though maybe it was a meeting that ran over and I had to
it might
leave
have
for
been.
another
There was
engagement.
never any discussion. I don't recall any discussion of.
Well, I
or-
think it was always kind of kicked down the road as this decision will be made in July.
No.
And so I think now we're at the point where we're making these decisions and having the discussion, and we've kicked the can to this place. So now I think we need to have the discussion.
I guess the other ones didn't seem to have a lot of objection. The other criteria that we're not focusing on today didn't seem to have a lot of objection when we talked about it as a policy committee. But these ones seem to have the most discussion. So that's why we, brought this one back. Staff thought about it some more. Wanted to give you a good memo that described our thinking behind the reasons for the word changing or the dropping one or something. So we were under the impression that the other ones were okay to go forward with. But that's up to you if you need to revisit those again.
Did you have one that you want to circle back on? Obviously not right now, but that you want to put a star by?
I think the last two capture my interest and attention right off the bat. We went over the slide pretty quickly, so I haven't had a chance to really think or to reference back to the previous staff report that included more robust descriptions.
So would you, as you have a chance to think about that, would you send an email to Mike and Ray?
Yeah,
that
I'd be
you'd
happy
like to
to.
put a star by them?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maria?
Thank you. I also have a hard stop at 1:30, so just wanted to throw in my 2 cents because I'm going to have to hop off. And it actually very conveniently relates to this current topic of the existing criteria, no changes proposed. I do want or would like to put like a star on reduces a gap in a regional system, addresses a known safety location issue, addresses a bottleneck along a corridor. Because I would be interested in being more like bike ped focused. Addressing a bottleneck along a corridor could be that we could have, instead of 5 individual drivers in a vehicle, they could be riding the bus, or a known safety location issue, as always, increasing like the walkability and safety of sidewalks. and reduces a gap in the regional system, I think could also tie into those. But I do appreciate everyone's time, and I'm going to go ahead and hop off.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Maria. And I know Sadie, you're gonna have to jump. Lyle.
I'm curious what tax take is on this. And was this given to the TAC?
Yes.
What was their response?
They didn't have any proposed changes on the existing ones. We've talked to them on.
So while you're thinking about that for a sec, would it be helpful to send to the group the metrics that go with the review, what the
Right.
metrics are that go with the ones that we're not proposing changes so that everybody understands what's being measured?
And you can also refer into appendix C of your RTSP. It goes into detail of how the projects are selected. And at the back, it will have, here's the criteria and here's some of the metrics that I'm using to look at a gap in the regional system or access to employment center or jobs. I'd like to say something general, just kind of put this whole discussion in the context that I look at it. You know, we have goals, we have a multimodal plan. So it's a plan for vehicles, for bicyclists, for pedestrians, for transit, etc. And then safety is kind of overarching. We want safe systems for all those systems, right? So in developing the goals, we develop goals for all those systems. And we talk about accessibility, et cetera. And then when we keep narrowing it down to criteria, they're all linked. So these criteria are linked to all those goals. So reducing a gap in the regional system, we are looking at pedestrian systems and bicycle systems. And so if a project is proposed for the plan, that's going to add sidewalks on a street that doesn't have sidewalks, that's the gap. And it would get a positive, yes, gets 1 point. Same for bicycles. For transit, we have a criteria for transit. So the intent is trying to improve all our transportation systems. Before I mentioned transit, bike, ped, and roadway.
And freight.
So that's why we have so many of these. I know we can look at any one of them and say, well, this one doesn't talk about transit, but another one does. Or this one does, this one about bottleneck doesn't talk about bicyclists, but we have another one that does talk about bicyclists. We're a multimodal plan. We can't just focus on one mode. We look at vehicle mode, we look at pedestrian mode, transit mode, and safety among all of them. So I hope people take that in the spirit that it's supposed to be multimodal. We can't focus on just one thing. We can't put priorities in our funding, you know, we can shift the percentages certain ways, but we can't necessarily exclude one mode altogether. Yeah.
I have a question. So for number 3, I know that we're not there yet, but since people are gonna have to leave, it says, it specifically says that due to the lack of adequate methodologies for estimating future emissions, we want to keep it as qualitative instead of quantitative. Does that change with what we talked about earlier and discussions with ODOT to measure greenhouse gas?
So press pause. I love that question. And I had the same one. Actually, I made the same note. So can we get there a little bit more linearly before we jump? Okay. So we have a couple of stars on this. There's some information we're going to provide to the policy committee members. Also encourage everybody to get a hold of your TAC members to have additional conversations about how this impacts the area or mode that you represent. And that way you can get some of the other questions answered.
And this,
Or just call Ray.
well, because if it's just filters through the TAC members, they'll just say.
Call Ray.
So.
That's okay. That's big. So on the, before you get to this one, are we good with, go back one, on EJ? I know we talked about adding some more language and so forth, but this is shifting it from the negative into the positive. If we want to, in the description of what this means, we can talk about what we mean by improve, emphasizes, you know, quality of life, accessibility. We can put in some of the intent, but not make that hard and fast criteria that's going to end up tying some of our projects into knots.
And, you know, in the memo, I do talk about where I was I realized that, you know, improve is a horrible word to be using in any vague way or use in transportation, because it can be widen a road, it can be make it better, it has a lot of uses. And so I was trying to narrow it down in the verbiage in the memo, but we could also use a different word or expand it like Sadie suggested, or have it, you know, do something totally different. And on top of that, talk about the criteria that it would be used for the valuation. And that's something that really I didn't include in here because first I want to get the bigger idea done, and then we can, you know, work on. You can see how things will be evaluated when they come forward. And you know, the other part of this is Julie and Janelle are online, you know, and Dan, is like the description of the projects really limit or provide us the basis of making these qualifications for evaluations for the criteria. So if we're going down, you know, a quality of life way, we have to think about how that would be represented in the project description.
And how do these descriptions compare to other MBOs?
I don't know. Actually, some of ours are a lot better. So I looked at, I mean, so
I'd just like to
over
see-
time, we've had, you know, improve an intersection. Now, what does that mean? Because I don't know. Oh, and Sarah doesn't know.
Was your question the definition of the criteria, or is your question the description of projects? I don't
Well,
know.
Definition of the criteria that they all use.
That's what I thought.
So-
Oh, that one's okay.
Because the 9 we have worked great. And I asked the question, how many we've been challenged on? 0. We meet all criteria with the original 9. So I guess that goes back to that point we had a few months ago when I asked, why are we changing what we currently have? If it works.
No, one of them doesn't work.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
wanted,
We're gonna get
And
rid
the
of
one
that.
that doesn't work,
Yeah.
then let's address the one.
Yeah.
But I guess that's where, and I know the TAC was, at that time, was not in favor of this either.
Well, most of the TAC was, some of the
Okay.
TAC members have never been in favor of any sort of criteria. However, it's true. And I won't mention names, but you get the guess who.
No,
So there are, you know, I would say this is part and parcel with the performance-based planning paradigm. You know, it's used in a lot of planning ways, develop some criteria, evaluate projects. So we're just following best practices. And our criteria, you know, we worked on them last time, so 2018, and we had some little stuff before that. You know, we tested it, and that's where we're coming from is, okay, having gone through all this evaluation, some of them, I'm going to skip ahead,
Yes.
for like the cultural, historic, and environmental resources, everybody got a +1 because all the projects are not taking, they're not impacting, you know, it was one that, well,
sounded good in concept, but in application didn't pan out to be useful.
because all your staff are doing too good a job of avoiding takings and running over salmon and polluting waterways and destroying natural buildings or old
Yes.
historic buildings. So anyway,
So, but on the EJ, before we leave that entirely, what the change over is from going to the negative, let's not build a roadway through the middle of somebody's neighborhood, which, when was the last time we did that in this region?
No.
Never. Okay, I've been here 40 years. If it's before that, it's before my time. But to put it into the positive, what we've already been doing in terms of priorities, when the staff, when our local jurisdictions and the TAC bring us a project like Auburn Road, that was what we were about. It's going to improve transportation facilities for all modes and provide a level of safety that was non-existent on that entire stretch. And that is what that was about. So to flip it to the positive, saying, that's what we do. That is what we're about. And EJ or not, it's going to improve transportation facilities on a really significant level. And when we talk safe routes to school, we talk about arts, all roads, transportation safety, things like that. That's what we were doing.
In all areas,
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
just one,
No, in
Not-
all.
not pick one, but all areas.
Exactly, and those comprehensive corridor projects that we were doing. I love the switch into affirming what we already have been doing as a group and as a region. Within projects.
Better environment for everyone.
However people choose to travel, they can do it safely. They have the opportunity to do it in a safe manner. And they can get from point A to point B.
So I think the solution was already more or less proposed, which is that if there's a way that we could add the intent, which you said, without adding quantitative requirements, if we could just add infuse a little bit of the intent to avoid what Sadie was worried about, that would be fantastic.
And if we can do that in the narrative, I think that's what Ray was attempting to do here, because this will be included in the document.
Okay.
And that helps get to intent. So that can be the wording, but in the intent, in the narrative, we can include things like that, but we don't have to come up with metrics that are for the squishy.
And for, next time, you know, you'll see, that.
Okay, now let's,
And now.
anybody object to dropping the second one? Real quick. On the historical, because we are so wonderful. Anybody think that's a terrible idea to drop this?
I mean, I'm concerned about dropping it. I mean, I love that we've never needed it, but I don't want to get to the point that we regret that we dropped
Well,
it.
so there's also, and it's not part of the, well, it's part of the, in the chapter 8, we have impacts. And so what we do, there is some federal rules that I'm shared with you. But they say that you can't do this.
Right.
Right, and
It's
so.
already baked
Covered
in.
in federal rules.
It's
That's fine.
covered in federal rules, so that's where this came from. So, you know, everyone's meeting federal rules and they're, if they, this is why you see so much rain gardens now, because you're trying to protect the streams that have salmon and ES 202, which is water quality. You're doing other things to make sure that, well, we know where all the National Register of Historic Places are, so we know which buildings not to knock over. We know lots of things, and except archaeological, which no one will actually tell you because it's confidential. They're doing it so this is 20 years out. It's pretty easy to say, don't go through there because there's a protected species.
So you're saying this is repetitive.
So this is sort of, it turns out repetitive.
Okay.
So that's why, but and chapter 8, we do show where all the projects are, and we talk with the resource agencies, so they point out.
As long as we're not, at the end of the day, removing protections, I'm okay with it.
Because most of them are already at federal or state level, and people are already doing those things. So,
When you do your project design, you also have to take into account your
yeah.
tribal lands, your fish habitat and so forth. So on the design level, that happens.
Yeah, and so
I can tell you for a
better
fact,
at-
it's-
at
yeah.
at that level then, because we're at 30,000 feet,
Mhm.
20 years out, and when you get down to parents' problems, when giving people money or right before they come for money, that's when that.
It would also just be a bad look if we accidentally gave money to a project that turned out to violate federal rules, which would be my only other.
Well, I don't think this would,
Tends to be
we
a
wouldn't
problem.
know about it at this level anyway.
Well, in that case, I'm convinced.
Okay.
As long as we're not removing protection.
In your project description, you will need to list that you take that into consideration. With your criteria when you're talking about federal funds.
When
The
you-
IGA level. So it's,
Intergovernmental agreement for those who like
when
equity.
when the project's approved and when they're getting for funding, that's when. There's another level of environmental review that goes on right before, and Todd would love to tell you all about
We
it.
pretty much start with it
Yeah,
yeah.
in all of our
yes.
projects.
That's why preliminary
not listed,
engineering costs so much.
If it's not listed when you're going for funding, that you haven't addressed those,
No.
that throws up a flag to me if we remove that.
Yeah, but
I know
then-
it's redundant.
yeah,
but
and
it's-
20 years out, when it's just one, you know, they're going to do it at some point after, you know, we're a planning document, not a,
Not a design document.
not a design, not a definitely funded document. Reasonably anticipated to be funded in the future,
2048 or sooner.
2050, whatever.
And we're gonna look at it in 4 years anyway. Everybody has to remember, this says it's a long-term document, but it's not really. We get to do this again. No, you get to do this again in 4 years.
We'll be here.
I may not. So
Okay. So the
That's fine.
final one for swapping out environmental, so the proposed wording, we brought this up whenever, like March, I believe. Project is likely to reduce operational greenhouse gases where operational is cars going around, vehicles going around. Reasons for adding are listed, aligns with the state goals that have been around for a while now. There have been 2 executive orders from the Biden administration, and now there's the new proposed rule from FHWA. So to get to Sarah's question about, well, can we measure it? So, and I'll try to put this in whatever file it means. So tailpipe emissions for CO2 on the NHS is basically you take the fuel sold in the state and you take the amount of travel on the NHS. So the ODOT,
National Highway System.
National Highway System, yeah, ODOT counts cars and trucks and whatnot on a random assortment of roads in the metropolitan area and throughout the state. And that gives them an estimate for the vehicle miles traveled that year. And then we can estimate, that's the total number, and then you estimate how many miles are on the NHS. So you have 2 parts of the equation now. Unfortunately, this doesn't allow me to scribble, so you'll have to visualize my hand waving. So we have gasoline, we have fuel purchases,
Okay.
volume. We have the amount of travel that's on the NHS, and then we have some factors for the emissions by the type of fuel that is sold. And then that gives you a number. So it's rated at the federal level, but it's really just an estimate. And it's proposed, so it might change. So I come back in a year and I'll tell you what's, or 6 months. You know, you give us some.
So it sounds like we still do not have estimating ability now, but we may in 4 years.
Well, we can estimate now, although I don't think I have access to fuel sale. Well, that's the other thing. I don't know the amount of fuel that is sold only in Salem-Keizer.
That's fair.
So it's just evolved.
Stay here anyway.
Yeah,
So
so,
the negotiations that we're going through with ODOT will not have an effect on our ability to potentially add qualitative or quantitative reporting.
not that I know of, but these things tend to change over time. So we will reevaluate it
Yeah.
in 4 years.
4 years.
Right, and keep us posted if anything does change between now and when we do. Because I know this is just a discussion based today, so.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Well, I think that, you know, executive orders are really poor basis for making decisions. It's a guideline, maybe. But looking at the FHWA proposed rules, I would really press pause and adopt something once we know when they've actually adopted rules, because FHWA has money. And I like their money. It has the right color.
We can spend it, yes.
Yes, I like being able to, if it allows us to get dollars for a project, I don't care if they call it tiddlywinks for unicorns. If it gets me money to build my sidewalk, I will put tiddlywinks to unicorns on my project. I'm not an ideologue, I'm practical. I want money.
That hits the minute.
Yep, well, I like the transcription was deliberate money, I think.
I like that.
That's good.
Deliberate money. I am deliberate for money. I deliberately want money.
Well,
That's really.
part of the reason we take you through this onerous process is so that we're checking the box at the federal level, that we're doing all these things the federal government requires us to, so that when we apply for things, we can say, yes, we have done this. Yes, we have followed the planning regulations. Yes, we have done all this. So
Right.
I know it seems sometimes a little bit crazy and hard to understand why we do it, but that's one of the reasons.
It's along for the ride.
As long as we get the money from the feds, because we spend it better than anybody. We get the best value on all of our projects across our region, bar none. I can say that without fear of anybody disagreeing. So there we go. So I really want to kind of tag this one on that first one, the FHWA rule, because that one has the dollars attached to it. The state goals were, that one's going to court, so stay tuned on that.
Well,
But the first one is the big one.
Yeah, and I mean, this, when I say state goals, I mean the ones that were set in 2004 by the legislature.
Okay, that's old news, okay.
The ones that have been around forever, not the EO 2020-04 stuff.
Yeah,
That's different than.
okay. Go with you.
That's continuation. of this, so.
We'll see where that goes. But anyway, yeah, if it's something that's measurable, that's not going to be a barrier to us getting our projects funded. So really want to zero in on the federal highway requirements. And if we need to adjust something to get that money coming to us, I'm okay with that. Other than that, I really want to leave it to the local jurisdictions to again, bring projects forward, because these projects don't come from the SCAT staff. These come from our TSPs and from the transit strategic plan. We are the ones putting these together, and we are bringing them forward because we know they are going to be able to qualify for federal funding to get these suckers built. At the end of the day, the last thing I want is another plan on the shelf. I want the pavement going down for the roadway, for the bike lane, and for the sidewalk. And if I don't get that, I'm really not interested in much else. I want to get those suckers built.
I have a little bit more hesitation than that, because I also want to make sure that we're building things that are ultimately going to add to the quality of life for everyone in the future as well. So I don't mind pumping the grapes if we have to. We may just differ a little bit there.
Well, the projects we have on our list, when you look at our TSPs, they are exactly that. If we have gaps in the sidewalk, if you're walking the roadway like you are, your street is in the Salem TSP. I will be willing to put money on that one.
Dangerous
You have
intersection.
to let me know afterwards what street it
I
is.
bet it is, but only because Costco's over there.
Oh, I know exactly what we're talking about. And what we did with our TSP is we actually drew a circle around all of our neighborhoods and said all the sidewalks in there. It's in our TSP. So it's up to me, it's up to my council and my staff to bring projects that can qualify for these dollars to accomplish exactly what you're talking about, that will have long-term benefits for my neighborhoods, my community, for all safety. And that's what what we have found traditionally and very intentionally from all the members of SCATS to do exactly that, which is why we are so successful competing for these dollars and get these projects delivered. So really want to put out there that we have a very responsive region when it comes to comprehensive project planning and delivery and prioritization. And I can't see changing a word in any of this that will change any project at all. Or the prioritization, because they all address these goals.
It just concerns me to add more criteria and more confusion to getting projects through and ranking.
Yep.
That's what concerns me the most. We start changing this criteria.
I'm right there with you.
I think updates are necessary to be able to keep up with what's going on as we go forward. I mean, it would be great to keep things as little confusing as possible, which is part of the reason why we're looking at taking redundancies out. But updates will need to be made as we move forward, because climate was less of a concern. I mean, we were talking earlier about metrics for roads. Metrics for roads are going to change with like increased heat, just simply. I mean, we've had, states have buckling roads and things like that. So I think updates are going to continue to be necessary, even though they are inconvenient.
And they always happen. Always happen, always will.
Yep, there's nothing new there. Absolutely. All right. Do you have enough to go on to get us ready for next month? We have a lot of people gonna call you.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we've discussed this issue of criteria multiple times now. We'll listen to the tape again, I guess, to see if we're on the right track. I hope we're on the right track. I hear different opinions about whether we're going down the right track or not, but at some point we would like some consensus that we need a set of criteria, whether it's these 10 or 9 we have, or 15. We're ready to start saying, okay, he's got the project list from the locals. And he starts saying, okay, how does this project do on these 10 criteria?
Right.
Do they get a 0? Do they get a 1? You know, it boils down to that. And then comes up with a giant list that says, hey, here are the projects ranked by the number of points they got. And here's the ones that, how much they cost. Here's the ones we can include in the plan. Here's the ones that we can't include because they're illustrative. So they're still listed, but they're not in the 20 years. And then as Ray alluded to very quickly at the beginning, there's room for someone to say, wait, somehow my project ended up like 3 from the bottom. But I could tell you it's really important and you could advocate for having that included. So it's an exercise to try to show how the goals filter down to how projects are selected, but it doesn't capture everything about the project. So there's that fail safe, I should say. And that's what happened last time as well. There were definitely projects that moved around. So we're doing this to prove to the federal government we are performance-based planning, but to you guys, if there's something that got missed out, is that out too?
And so, just, timeline wise, next month, there's the target setting for performance measures. And in September, we're bringing you the congestion management process, which is a document that you will need to adopt. And I'm beginning to think maybe I should have a primer for that one as well. But,
I highly recommend having a primer.
So that we might have a primer
Reading
in
side.
August. And then luckily there's nothing to talk about the tip, because the tip has no money. So we don't have to talk about it forever.
So the tip, we were supposed to select projects in August and you kind of did that already in June, so.
Oh, look at us. We're so efficient.
So to do it, there's no new money, no projects.
That's right.
So hopefully it looks like another month of talking.
Aw.
But at some point we need decisions made
Yes.
by the committee.
Yeah. Because, well, I've given your staff deadline of last week and I'm not looking at anyone in particular, for financial predictions at the local level, and then that will be used, figure out what's going on. And to evaluate the projects and then come up with the initial, see how much money we have and how many of the current projects can actually fit. And that's really where the evaluation or you guys come in at the selection.
Sounds good. Well, this has been a very robust conversation. We're going to press pause here. Tip modifications have been provided by Karen.
Informational, if you have any questions, we can quickly zip through those.
Okay. Does anybody have a question on any of these modifications when you read through them?
I am going to tell you that number 5, where we slipped a project, the transit project, because it hadn't been obligated, it was, and you'll see next month, it will come right back in.
Okay. It slipped and it slipped again.
Looked at it, got re-advanced, so.
Oh, okay. It boomerang.
It boomerang.
Got you. Okay, thank you for that heads up. Until you would see that and go, wait, what? Coming up, the Oregon Transportation Commission will meet in Eugene on September 14th, and of course, they're always online. Our next policy meeting will be on August 23rd. The next TAC meeting will be on August 9th. Again, please, policy committee members, connect with your TAC representative. And then check here on the status of the planning projects. Make sure the one you want is on there. I am super excited about the Brook Lake the Energy Area Management Plan. I was on that virtual event. It was fabulous. And we will go to work as soon as they adopt that sucker to see if we can get some money to build it and save a lot of lives. Jerry's long range plan. Huh? OMPOC is, it's not even on here. OMPOC is this Friday.
Friday, and who's coming?
I am.
And who from, anybody from transit?
Katie,
It is,
I can't make it this Friday.
Virtual.
it's all virtual, it's all virtual.
It's all virtual, and boy, I understand.
So Kathy and.
Katie signed up for it, but I'm not sure.
Okay, there's that too. So, okay, so Kathy and Sadie for Alpha.
Okay, and Mike will be there. Okay. That's what I've got. We're coming to the top of the hour. Anything else for the good of the order? Lyle?
Two things to recognize. I just want to point out Anna Henson.
Woo!
Congratulations. She is our Area 3 Transportation Director. Is that the correct?
No, it's not as fancy as that.
All right. Give us the official title.
Thank you, Commissioner Morhorse. It's Area 3 Manager.
Took the interim off.
Yes. And thank you. And I apologize for not being there in person today. My intent is to attend these in person. It's too hard virtually.
Well, congratulations. I'm excited working for you in the future, with you in the future. It's gonna be fun.
Thank you. I'm excited. I appreciate it.
And then next up, Karen Odenfeld. So will you, how many more meetings do you have with us?
Oh, a few.
A few.
Yes,
Oh, good.
I'm actually probably gonna stick around till next June as far as you guys are concerned.
Hopefully
Well,
that.
let's go next year.
Yeah, if they say, don't worry about me. If it's Dan Fricky, you need to worry about.
Dan Frankie.
We
Right.
always have to worry about Dan.
How long do you have, Dan?
Too long, no. Um, September 1st, but I'll be around probably till the end of the year. So you're not quite getting rid of me yet.
That's good.
We didn't give you all the combinations to your ankle bracelet. You have to earn them one at a time.
I'll look forward to that.
I just enjoy working with all you guys and thank you for everything you do for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, well, thank you very much, all. The time is 2:01 and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.